So welcome to Time Management for Brains That Work Differently. While folks are still filtering in, we are expecting, yep, here we go. We are expecting some more folks to come in. But so while folks are filtering in to our conversation today about how to have time management actually work for our brains, let's start with a little share if you feel like it. So you can feel free to drop it in the chat, to quietly reflect for yourself, or to just pop off mute and share it in the space. But what kinds of time management have you tried that other people loved and swore by, and you just hated it? So I can share one while you all are thinking. I remember I was a personal assistant to a CEO way back decades ago, because yes, I'm dating myself. And he loved the Franklin Covey systems, loved it, loved it, loved it, wanted everything to be done with the A priority, B priority, C priority, and would make me make a list that way and do it all that way. And I hated that so much. And also, I didn't see where it actually made him or me more productive, honestly. Pomodoro, yep. I know so many people with either love or hate Pomodoro. I'm one of those people that both loves and hates it. Certain types of tasks, Pomodoro works great for me, and other types of tasks, it makes me want to rip my hair out, throw the timer across the wall, and if the timer's my phone, that's especially problematic. So I can relate to that one for sure. Any particular organization app? Do you happen to remember the name of it? I know that there are different ones that have love-hate relationships for various people. I'm not trying to hate on. I'm not trying to like create a hate on people's businesses or anything, but I think it's always helpful to feel better. Yep. Time blocking is I ended up doing like a whole little mini series of videos on exactly that, Amanda, like how to have time blocking actually work for those of us who find the sort of standard ways of doing time blocking crappy, but still want to experiment with some form of time blocking. Yeah, so I can relate to all of those. We're going to give it another minute or two in case anybody else thinks of any others, and also for the other folks that have said they would be here today to have a chance to log in. This time of year is often so crazy with getting everything wrapped up before the holidays that it's often a mad scramble from one thing to the next. I'm trying to think of another one. This is, I think we often don't even think of this as a time management technique, but to-do lists are a time management technique that I know a lot of people love. I hate to-do lists so much. They make me feel so overwhelmed. Every time I look at like a long to-do list, I'm just like, there's too much there. Which one do I do first? I don't know. Even if it's just supposed to be my to-do list for the day, it completely, sometimes, especially if it's a long one, completely overwhelms me. And a lot of my motivation in finding time management strategies came from the fact that to-do lists made me so miserable that I was like, I have to find other ways. See, that's awesome that to-do lists work for you. That's so great. For both, yeah, see that. And for me, it's the opposite. When I changed my to-do list to a to-schedule list, that was like the biggest difference for me. It was a suggestion that a boss I had a while ago had. He's like, what if you just made it to schedule, and then you just had a 15-minute time that you sat down and like gave those things times of when were you going to do them this week, and it made it so much easier for me. Yeah. The to-do list. Do you have the thing where like you've crossed off a bunch of things, but you still have the things lingering, and then you're copying over a new one or trying to still work from the partially crossed off one? I've seen different people experiment with that. Yeah, they're like, for some people it makes them feel great. They see the things that they've got the lines through, and it gives them that little dopamine hit of like, look at the stuff I got done. And for some people it makes them feel chaotic and like they can't keep track of the things that are still to do. So it's so interesting to me always how different things work so differently for different people. So okay. Well, we'll go ahead and keep rolling, and then we'll catch people up if we need to. So some of you know me already, but just a quick refresher. I'm a researcher, an educator, I'm a neuroaffirming productivity strategist, and I specialize in supporting adults and some older teens if they really have their own goals, but mostly adults. I lead the course Spicy Brains Get Stuff Done on Maven. That next one kicks off in January. I'll have a little bit more about that later. I also lead other programs, individual coaching, things like that, and consulting for organizations. I spent about a decade teaching, researching, and leading tutoring centers in higher ed, and about a decade as a nonprofit executive. I'm also neurodivergent myself, and I'm the parent, spouse, and sibling of autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dysgraphic, and or anxiety prone family members. So there's a lot of different spices in our mental spice cabinet collectively across my family and friends, which is why I tend to talk about spicy brains or neurodivergence more broadly rather than just ADHD or autism individually. Key thing though is I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a medical professional. My PhD is education related, in other words. So I share insights from research because I am still a research nerd, and from lived experience, my own, my family members, my friends, my clients. My goal is to spark ideas, exploration, discussion, so that you have new thoughts that you can pursue and figure out what works for you. So what even is time management? Oxford defines it as the ability to use one's time effectively or productively, especially at work, because that's where we usually talk about it the most. Although I'm convinced that really where my time management skills get the most tried is as a parent rather than at work. So in conversation, though, oftentimes it connotes like a lot of things for different people and usually ends up in discussions of tactics rather than time management overall. Hi, welcome, Danny. So tactics like scheduling or time blocking or prioritization or task lists or even project management systems where people get into the details of like, here's how I manage my time. I use Asana, for, stuff like that. So when we're talking about time management, it's helpful to realize that we're often talking about a bunch of things all under this big category that also tends to come with a lot of associations of guilt and shame if we have a brain that works differently, and we've been getting a lot of messaging around how bad we are at time management. So with that in mind, I like diving into a little bit of research as a background, but before I even switch to the research slide, I want to give a big caveat. When there's research done on this kind of stuff for neurodivergent folks, usually it is done by psychologists or sometimes other types of researchers, social scientists of some sort, who are oriented towards neurodivergence with a deficit mentality. They are not oriented towards it usually. Now, this is changing more recently, but usually it is not oriented towards, oh, there are different types of brains and they work differently and they all have different, strengths and challenge areas, and let's work with it together, which is more the approach that I prefer. So a lot of times when you're looking at research, it's just looking at a deficit side. And I like to name that caveat before we look at some of the things from the research so that we are looking and noticing for that and not just reinforcing it accidentally. So when you look across research about, what are some of the common challenge areas for neurodivergent adults in the workplace around time management, 5 themes tend to come up. And I find it helpful in just the sort of affirmation like, hey, I'm not the only one that struggles with these things. At least that part of the deficit orientation is useful, right? So one is around planning and prioritizing. Things like organizing tasks, setting realistic timelines, like being able to say, oh yeah, this project is going to take 3 weeks. This one will take 1 week. Things like that tend to be challenge areas for us. Another one is initiation and follow through. So procrastination, I have a whole separate week on that in my course for a reason, because this is a very common challenge area for a lot of us. Task switching, incomplete tasks, those things all tend to go together and then make us feel like we're carrying even more heavy stuff that we're feeling guilty about. Temporal awareness, right? So judging durations, losing track of time, sometimes called time blindness in relation to ADHD. The thing I particularly want to call out here, though, is this deficit orientation shows up especially on this one of losing track of time as a bad thing. Losing track of time is also one of the main characteristics of the positive psychology state of flow that Csikszentmihalyi made very famous in the 90s and describes top athletes and top creatives and other people who have really achieved a bunch in a specialized area of their career or their life. That ability to get into a flow state is marked by losing track of time. And that is an asset and a marker of like predicting happiness and well-being. So when we only look at it from the deficit side, we end up losing some of those aspects. And I just like to call that out. 4th one is perspective memory, right? So remembering to act at the right time without some kind of external prompt to get us to do that tends to be a thing that's not so strong in a lot of us. And finally, routines and boundaries, keeping daily structure, preventing overwork or disengagement. Now, I kept that first one of keeping daily structure because that's what shows up in the research, but I want to flag that, again, I think that's nonsense. We have this narrative that we've picked up from especially like Western culture where it's sort of like, hey, your structure should be the same. As if there's something like inherently good about your routine being the same every single day, and you having the same level of productivity every single day, as if that is a win in and of itself. Rather than unasking that question and going, hey, what rhythm of getting things done allows me to avoid either overwork or disengagement, right? What allows me to sort of flow with, hey, some days I'm going to get a ton done in one day, and other days I'm going to get very little done. But as long as it balances out and I'm able to get things done when I need to, that's fine. And that's not a problem I need to solve for. And I see that with a lot of clients where they think they need to solve for making themselves predictable rather than needing to solve for how do I get things done in the time I want to get them done without feeling exhausted or bored. So what are some of the common success strategies that show up in the research? Well, unsurprisingly, the research on this is a lot lighter than the deficit-oriented research, but there are a few themes that come up. The first is when we have personalized time representation, right? So when we figure out a way of representing time that fits us. So this can look like visual schedules. This can look like color coding. This can look like time blocking. Hey, this time of day I know is my deep work time. This time of day I know is meeting time. This time of day is more administrative, logistical task time. That can help us. Building routines and identity. I bolded that on purpose, around sustainable practices rather than neurotypical norms. There's only one article that framed it this way, but I was like, hey, yay, at least there's somebody that is bringing this up, right? That like when we have routines that are actually a response to what we have figured out works for us, and we build the sense of ownership and identity around like, yeah, I do this because this is what works for me and allows me to get things done. That works out way healthier than when we keep trying to fit a model that somebody else has said is the model we're supposed to fit, and it's not a good fit for us. And then we're constantly in this like alternating failing, shame cycle, try again, fail, shame cycle, try again, that really wears us out. And finally, having external supports, right? So figuring out, okay, if I'm going to get into a flow state, how beautiful, how wonderful. I better set a timer that like snaps me out of it if there's something that is actually time bound that I need to get to, because I need to know this and acknowledge this about myself and use those external supports instead of feeling like I've got to remember to be at that thing. I loved, Amanda, that for instance, you already had this open because you were like, I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to miss this while I was working on something else. So I'm in here early. You don't need to talk to me. I just have it open so that I don't lose track of it, right? I use that strategy all the time. Okay, so I want to translate that into a few tangible tactics. From some of the conversation we're having at the beginning with the shares, these exact first two tangible tactics may not work at all for a couple of you, and that is fine. These are not the be-all, end-all list of tactics. I just wanted to narrow it down to three that I've seen work really well for some of my clients. The first is to try flexible time blocking. So if time blocking hasn't worked for you, but you're like, ooh, I would like to be able to time, I still feel like there's something there. And by time blocking, I mean like, I put when I'm going to do a certain task on my calendar and I block a certain amount of time for it. Try using something that gives you a bit more flexibility. So for instance, my clients that love their paper planners, they use sticky notes instead of writing it into the paper planner when they're going to do something. If it is something that is movable, they make it movable, right? So if it's an appointment, it's in pen in the planner. But if it is work, they use the little skinny sticky notes to be like, I think I'm going to do this thing here and this thing here and this thing here. And then it gives them the ability to swap it, right? Nope, actually, I am not feeling checking my inbox right now. I don't want to, no. Now what can I swap it with that's also on there? So I'm still gonna negotiate with myself that I'm getting these things done today, but I'm able to trade around when it is that I'm doing it to fit what's going on for me. Especially if PDA is common for you, embedding further choices within each block can also be helpful. So for some clients I've seen where they put in there, you know, they can do this inside your Google Calendar too, and that's just as draggable and movable, but putting in like, okay, I'm going to do this or this, right? So I'm giving myself two choices. Great question. So PDA in the psychological literature stands for pathological demand avoidance. Again, I hate that deficit-based mentality. I tend to adopt a reframe that I've heard some other therapists use of persistent demand for autonomy. So basically PDA is really common in for a lot of neurodivergent folks, where if you have that thing that one of my clients joked, like it's the you can't make me and neither can I, like that, if you have that kind of thing that comes up all the time, where like the least thing that feels like an obligation just really causes you to be like, no, I'm not doing it, and you cannot make me, I cannot make me, nobody can make me, then building in more things that feel like meaningful choices helps to circumnavigate that. And finally, if you're really visual, try using different colors for different kinds of activities. So if I pulled up my Google Calendar right now, it would look like a rainbow exploded all over the screen, because I deliberately use different colors to help me know, like, this is when I'm actually live with someone. Don't move that one. This is when it's one-on-one. This is when it's a group. And then totally different colors for different kinds of deep work. That is administrative work, that is very different color than like my creative, I'm trying to write an article type work. So that helps me, before I even look at what I've written, because I'm very visually oriented, get a feel for my day, my week. Do I have enough trade-offs of the different kinds of things so that I can keep working with my energy level and not feel too tired or exhausted? Second tangible tactic is to estimate long for flow and short for admin. So if you tend to be someone with time blindness, right, where you're like, I have no idea, I consistently think something's going to take blank amount of time, and instead it was something completely else, right? Then a strategy I've seen help with that is, if a task is going to involve some kind of creative or critical thought, do your best faith estimate. Don't just cheat and be like, I don't know, I can get that done, right? Don't just be like, it's 15 minutes. Do your best faith. Okay, what do I really think based on what I've done before when I'm making a deck, or when I'm creating an article, or when I'm making a proposal or a memo or whatever? Okay, I think it's going to be this. And then triple it, especially if it's a new thing, right? Triple the amount of time that you think it's going to take when you're planning out what you're going to get done. Do the reverse of the task as administrative or logistical. The other thing we tend to do with time blindness is we massively over exaggerate. Oh my God, I hate putting away the dishes. It's going to be at least half an hour. Actually, it's going to be like 7 minutes, right? And so one of the things that many of my clients has found helpful is, when they just really have a hard time predicting, they just start using stopwatches. They're like, let me go see how much time this task actually takes me. So the next time I do it, I can more accurately predict how long I need to allocate for this. This one is particularly helpful if you tend to be the kind of person that puts 16 things on your to-do list at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day, only 5 of them got done. And the same thing happens the next day, and the same thing happens the next day, and then you feel really crappy about yourself. Usually that means that you're a bit of a what's called a tidsoptimist in, I think it's Swedish, where you just tend to like really optimistically think that all is possible to fit all of these things into this small amount of time, because we're not so great with orienting towards clock time. Yeah, that makes total sense. That this, yes, stopwatches help both of my neurodivergent kids a lot too. Just like, okay, now I can see how much time this actually is, or I can see how much time is left. All those things really help. And then finally, if you don't already have a really clear sense of how different things predictably affect you, it's worth taking a little bit of time to identify your own rhythms, right? So things like, when does deep work tend to be easiest for me? Morning, afternoon, evening? When, like, after I've been in a meeting, do I tend to feel tired? Like, oh my God, that was terrible. In which case I might need to do an administrative task, like email inbox archiving. Or do I tend to feel relieved? Like, thank goodness that meeting is over. Now I can go and, okay. I hope you guys can still hear me. If you want to drop in the chat. Oh, yes. Okay. There's some. All right, great. So pine cubes, I've also heard a lot of people rave about. Thank you for sharing that one, Danny. And then if there are certain predictable events, right? So this might be like, I tend to feel especially energized before weekends, or energized after the weekend, or very tired after the weekend, right? Hormonal cycles, right? So at this time in my monthly cycle, I tend to feel like boom, 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 boom. And at this time, I tend to feel like whatever, I have no bleepy bleeps to give, right? Or around holidays, right? I know that I get especially jazzed and motivated, a sense of urgency before I'm about to go on a break. Then I get a bunch of stuff done. When I come back, I feel really tired, or maybe the reverse, right? But if you can start noticing those, well, I know I'm going to be more drained or more energized during this time period. Well, let me plan around that. It makes it much easier than we just keep setting our expectations at the same level over and over again with no awareness of how these things tend to affect us. Overall, the goal is, can you identify your flags for increasing or decreasing what you need to be spending time on, and how much something is going to take? So We're about to jump into your questions, but before we do, just wanted to quickly mention about the Spicy Brains Get Stuff Done course. You can use this QR code to go straight to the page with a 10% off discount. The next one starts in January. That's a couple of the reviews from folks, but there's more visible on the page. And we get into things like procrastination, distractibility, owning your attention, decision making, all this kind of stuff specific for brains that think differently. So, everything in mind, please feel free to jump in now with your questions, and I will stop sharing so I can more easily see you all. And if you have a question that you would rather not stay on the recording, let me know, and I will happily turn off the recording. But this, for the next 9 minutes, is your time of, hey, those 3 tactics you shared are terrible for me. What else you got? Here's the problem I run into, or other questions about anything that I've been sharing. Feel free to just come off mute, by the way.
Hi, Becca, I have a question. You mentioned feeling tired and relieved after meetings. Is there like a chemical or science-based reason for why my brain does that?
Yeah, so yes, and it depends on what your reaction is, right? So when we feel tired after meetings, there's a couple possible things that are going on. One is if you are more on the introverted side, you get your energy from being alone, then it means that we're doing a lot of performance when we're in a group. We're doing a lot to like monitor ourselves. We're putting a lot more attention to all of that. And doing that just drains our resources. It's the same way as if you set up a bunch of programs to suddenly be running in the background of your computer, the computer starts moving more slowly and it's sucking up more power, right? It's the same thing that happens with us. If you tend to feel relieved, then usually what it means is, yeah, meetings weren't my jam, but I was able to just like sit comfortably sort of inside myself and not be expending a lot of energy on this. And so now I'm just like, boom, I'm able to jump back into my stuff. And I even know some people that feel energized after meetings, certain kinds of meetings. But if they feel like that they were engaged in a meaningful, creating something with somebody, engaged in a meaningful group discussion, sometimes those type of meetings are then the ones where they're like, yes, I have a fresh burst of ideas and I want to, go apply them. So it's also not all meetings are created alike, right? Live memo meetings are where we are getting no hits of dopamine. We're getting no sense of connection or anything that fuels us. It's just like, you could have sent this to me in an email, but instead you wanted to lecture it to me at my face. Yeah, what's happening is like our whole brain is just like, right? And that's very different than if it's like, ooh, we're actually doing something and I was able to be prepared for it and I was excited to be doing it. That's then building up our, potentially our oxytocin because we're feeling connected to people. It's building up our dopamine because we're getting these hits of like, I'm making progress towards something. And so then all of those things give us a bit more energy afterwards. Anybody else?
Hey, Becca.
Hey.
I have question or looking for insight on kind of like longer term timescales.
Okay.
And how to get things done, right? So in January of this year, I purchased a craft kit that I wanted to make as a present for someone for the holidays this year. Obviously, it didn't get done. But like how to keep those longer time scale things, worked in so that you're not forgetting them and you're actually making progress.
Yeah, so I've seen different strategies work for people with this. So I'm going to ask you a question back first so I can be more likely to pull one that's applicable. Was it that you didn't think to work on it, or was it that every time you thought to work on it, you were like, I could do that later?
Probably more of the latter. I did think about it several times throughout the year, but yeah, it did seem like, okay, I've still got a few months, and then the months just whittled away.
Yeah. And then when you were thinking that, like, oh, I've still got time later, was it because as you imagined doing that activity, you're like, I'm not really that interested in doing that activity anymore? Or was it because it was like, oh, I really want to do that activity, but I just can't let myself do it yet because I have to get all these other things done first?
I think it's more that I struggled with getting it started.
Yeah.
And if I had probably gotten it started, I would have been okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that task initiation piece, so that, yeah, because I've seen a lot of these like, different root causes come in with something like this. And so that's what I was wondering. So when it's task initiation, then usually the like shrinking it down and holding ourselves to that. So this is the equivalent of like the 5-minute room rescue, right? Where you like put on 5 minutes of really upbeat music and just be like, okay, while that's playing, I'm going to just tackle this one part of this room that I have been avoiding cleaning. And then that gets us over that initial task initiation hit. And then we usually have the momentum to be like, I could do 5 minutes more, right? I could do a little bit more on this. That first step is usually the biggest hurdle. And so if you could shrink it way more, like, okay, you know what, all I'm going to do this time, I'm just going to open up the packet and I'm going to read through the directions. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to start it. I'm just going to read through the directions of what's involved in doing this. And then if you're still feeling resistant, if that doesn't automatically lead to like, oh, that's really interesting. Actually, you know what? I want to get started on it. And that's fine. Then, you know, the next week you do something like, okay, all I'm going to do this time is I'm just going to do the first step from the directions. I'm just going to take 15 minutes to like shrink it down to something that's literally 5 to 15 minutes so that the effect in your brain is like, you know what? I could do anything for that short a period of time. It's fine if it's for that short a period of time. And that usually helps us get over the task initiation for the longer projects. And then once we're in it, it then becomes easier to project plan, right? So that's one of the big myths that I've seen happen is like project plan it all out. And for some people, all that does is just cause us to push it far, far, far down the road because project planning is the most miserable thing for us ever. Not for everybody, right? But for some people, like, the thing I most want to procrastinate on is project planning. Whereas just like starting a piece of it, you get some headway, you get a better sense of like, oh, this is how long it's taking me. And then you can kind of pause and be like, okay, given how this is going, when do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to do it once a month? Do I want to do it every week? But it becomes a bit easier to kind of step into that planning after you're actually, 10 to 20% into the thing that you're doing. Does that resonate at all with you, Mabel?
It does. Yeah. I feel like if I could take that step and then I'd have a clearer picture about how long it would actually take me.
Yeah.
I think that's the other piece too, is that I don't know how long this is actually going to take me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you just keep pushing it. Yeah. I think the other thing is if you have to, so usually extrinsic motivators are not a great fit for us because they like bump up our dopamine and then we have a trough afterwards and then we feel terrible and it's harder to do. But for task initiation, sometimes very small extrinsic motivators can be really useful. So if you notice you just like, I shrunk it small and I keep kicking it down the road, make it so like, yeah, you know what? I'm not allowed to have that square of chocolate I really want until I read the directions. Once I read the directions, I can have that chocolate square, right? Like give yourself a very small, make it the step in between the thing you want to do at that moment and allowing yourself to do it. And that can sometimes help with just the initial task initiation. It won't work if you keep doing it every time you work on the project, but it does sometimes help as the way of just like taking that first or second step. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Thank you.
Amanda or Danny, either of you have a question you want to throw in before we're out of time?
I don't have any questions, but this is my cube.
Oh.
Whatever. Yeah. And I don't remember where I got it or who recommended it, but it was someone that was talking to me about their difficulty getting projects started, getting projects finished. And I'm like, this is dumb. This isn't going to help. And I set it down for 15 minutes the first time and lost my mind. I was doing so much stuff. Like, I gotta go. And it was hilarious because it really, really motivated me. And I don't know why, but it still does. Yeah. And it motivates 3 of my 4 kids. It's, I don't understand really the psychology of it, to be totally honest. And I don't care, honestly, because it works and I don't want to play with it. And, but that's my cube. So I keep it on my desk.
I already have one in my Amazon cart, Danny, for that suggestion. I think that's wonderful. And I just learned from listening to you and Mabel about like, I just need so many of the things I learned in your course. I use most with my kids, and I need to just remember to apply them to my own brain. But we're not getting done. We're just getting started. Like that's a phrase that works for our kids. And now I know what PDA is. And I'm like, oh, that's what's happening at these certain moments and getting ready for school where brilliant kids just fall apart. And it's like, well, you get out of your own way, man. So anyway, everyone's getting one of those little cubes in their stocking ASAP, and I will tell you how it goes.
I definitely want to hear how it goes, Amanda. That's awesome. All right. Well, we're at time. Thank you all so much for joining. Feel free to reach out afterwards. I think all of you have my sort of general share information, although I realize for anybody watching it afterwards, let me just quickly pull the screen back up because there is a QR code for anyone that wants it. So if you're not already subscribed to one of my newsletters to get notified about events like these, or you can follow me on your preferred social, it's very easy to just scan this QR code. That takes you to my link tree, and that's got all the options, all my socials, place for my newsletter, any of that stuff. So would love to see you in a future event, and I hope everybody has an awesome rest of your day. Take care.